Welcome to Live Courageously, the podcast show number 10 of 2022. And happy Mother's Day, and welcome to today's show, coming to you from rainy downtown Duluth, Minnesota, where I'm going to be for the next 7 weeks, line producing a feature film. I created this podcast show to share the stories of some amazing, courageous friends I'm honored to know and have had in my life. And I chose the title of Living Courageously because that's been the conscious theme of my life for the last 2 years since the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, and has been an unconscious theme for most of my life. And if you haven't seen the previous 9 podcasts with some amazing friends with some really powerful stories of overcoming all odds to live their best life, you can watch them on my Live Courageously YouTube channel and also at Duff Square Film on Rumble. I recommend you check them out and binge watch them. It's better than Netflix, and I must say, and you'll get a great dose of courage. So since I started this podcast show and became friends, and I keep meeting and becoming friends with some even more amazing, courageous people that I want to have on the show. And just an example, when I arrived here in Duluth a couple of days ago, I attended a welcome dinner with the Film Commission people here, and I met a police officer who served in Iraq in 2005 and 2009, and then joined the police force in Duluth and worked 20 years undercover, arresting drug dealers and human traffickers and serving the community. So just as an example, that's how lucky, ever since I started this show, I keep meeting people like him, and I look forward to going. I've been invited to go on a drive along with him in Duluth in the police vehicles, and having him on the show in the future. So stay tuned to keep meeting some great people every week. This show is about faith over fear. I believe fear is just a reaction, but courage is a decision and a choice. So I suggest that you need to consciously choose courage to get through life and deal with what life may throw at you. So I encourage you to adopt the spirit of courage in the face of any and all fears. So let's get to today and introduce you to my guest and a great friend, Dave Albin, someone who has lived a very courageous life and inspires others to live courageously as well. Dave was born in Hollywood, California in 1954, adopted at the age of 5, and raised by his aunt and uncle in Long Beach. Dave struggled in school as there was alcoholism in his family. And Dave will still tell you that he had an incredible childhood and is very grateful to his adoptive mother and his adoptive father, as they did the best they could. His father was a career military officer and his mother was a homemaker. Dave never saw or met his biological father, but he did on the east side of Long Beach, and there was many kids who grew up in the same street as he did. And he is still good friends with them to this day. And yes, Dave is a surfer boy from California, very different than me. We didn't even know what a surfer was in the Bronx, but he's a surfer boy. And today, Dave lives in the Appalachian Mountains of Western North Carolina. And when he was young, Dave struggled with drugs and alcoholism from the age of 10. He came close to death on more than one occasion as a result of drug addiction and alcoholism. And on June 8, 1988, he had had enough, and he reached out for help, and he joined AA. And that decision and that action served him well. He's been sober ever since some 33 years now. And shortly after getting sober, he read a book called Unlimited Power, a book that I also read when I was younger. And he went through an audio program called Personal Power, written and voiced by Tony Robbins, something that also influenced me as well. 8 years later, in 1995, a good friend who had read the same book, Unlimited Power, invited Dave to go on a live event with Tony. And it was at this event where Dave and 3,000 other people did a fire walk. And a fire walk is where you get to walk on hot coals in excess of 1,000 degrees. And it was that fire walk experience that would forever change his life. In fact, it influenced him in such a powerful way that Dave went on to work for Tony Robbins for over 19 years. And in 2003, he took over all Tony Robbins fire walks globally, and he was responsible for the logistics, the setup, and the training for all the staff for the fire walks. In 2014, and this is a lot because he's had an amazing life, Dave received a very inspiring phone call from Google, and they contacted him to put on a fire walk at their corporate headquarters in Mountain Valley for 148 Google executives. He accepted that offer and has done multiple events for them and their employees. And this one, where a light bulb went off for Dave, and he decided to start his company, the Firewalk Adventures. So his team has went on to help hundreds of thousands of people to date walk across hot coals, including many celebrities, professional athletes, and a host of business owners and entrepreneurs. His largest fire walk on record was done in London in 2005 for over 12,300 people. And his largest glass walk, which is something that we'll be talking about as well, was done in Paris, France in 2019 for over 1,500 participants. Since retiring from the Tony Robbins organization in 2014, he's gone on to do speaking gigs and trainings and firewalks and glass walks for NASA, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Chick-fil-A, RE Max, Heineken, and hundreds of others of large and small business. So that's a lot. And he will tell you straight up that what doesn't challenge you does not change you. And I'll say that one more time. He says that what doesn't challenge you doesn't change you. And I'm sure he'll be speaking about that. So if you're ready to transform your life, then Dave Albin is your guy. So I'd like to welcome my good friend and good brother, Dave, to our show today. Welcome, Dave.
Hi, John Duffy. Thanks, bro. That was a lot, mouthful, man.
It was, but that's the stuff that you've done a lot, man. So, I wanted to share all that with the audience. And, Dave, one of the first things I always do on the show is two things. I do one is I ask people, because so far everybody I've had on the show are people I know personally and are friends, and you're one of those. I asked them, where did we first meet, if you remember? And then I asked them, what does Live Courageously mean to you? So my first question is, do you remember the first time me and you met?
Yes, I do. Absolutely, I do. How could I forget, right? We got to share the stage at Notre Dame, which was spectacular.
Absolutely. And then we also met prior to that at NASA down in Houston, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's right. We met at NASA first in Houston, and then we went on and we shared the stage again in Notre Dame. Right. Okay. Yep.
That is correct. So that was, and it was kind of funny because when we met down at NASA, and obviously I got to know you and know your background and all the work you had done with Tony Robbins. And I know our paths had to cross because I attended at least 10 Tony Robbins programs and I staffed them, and I've done, about a dozen firewalks, but we never really actually met at any of those. But it was kind of interesting to learn all of that when I met you down in NASA. So, that's the first piece, and we'll get more back into that. The second thing is, what does Live Courageously mean to you? And you've obviously have.
I think it's a huge component, because without that part, you really just can't live your best life. You just can't. I think you have to learn to embrace fear and use it to your advantage. And because for most people, everything they have in their life, whether they have it or don't have it, has been influenced by fear. So, what's the acronym? Face everything and rise, or forget everything and run, right? You mentioned AA, and we talk about fear in AA a lot. And what they told me there was false images appearing real. And that really hit home for me, because that really made a lot of sense to me, because I knew that was applicable to my life. I had done that for such a long time. And getting back to that firewalk part, right, where I actually went, the guy that called me to tell me that Tony was coming to town, when I first got sober, what happened was, and I'll come back to that in a minute, when I got sober, I had insomnia. And I was up late at night all the time. And I was up late one night and I was watching the Tony Robbins infomercial, right? And, he was real big back in those days. He was all over, he had the #1 infomercial in the country. And I bought the Personal Power program. It was 30 days. And it came on little white things called cassette tapes.
Right? I remember them well.
Right. And so people go, what are those? Well, they were a form of recording, right? So it was really cool. So anyway, when I went through that, I loaned the book and I loaned that tape program to my buddy. And that's when, 7-8 years later, 95, he called me and said, hey, Tony Robbins is coming to town. It's going to be live. You got me into this. Come on, man. You got to come with me, right? And he literally, John, he called. He goes, look, I'll make the arrangements. I'll call you back, man. I'll take care of this. And so he calls me back like an hour later, and he goes, yep, it's all done. We pick up the tickets at will call. And here's what they said to do. You want to hydrate. You want to bring snacks. Be prepared to spend a lot of time in the room. And boy, was that an understatement.
No kidding.
Right? and then bring a good attitude and be ready to play full out. And I said, Dan, how much do the tickets cost? He's like $700. I go, no worries, bro. I'll play full out. And then just as he's getting off the phone, he goes, oh, by the way, we're going to be doing a fire walk. And it was almost like it slowed down, right? Fire walk, right? And I remember thinking, oh, hell no, we are not doing that. I want to see Tony, but I'm not going to do that. And I'm sure you don't have to. You know, that's for the crazies. I'm not going to, we don't worry about it. But I didn't say anything to Dan, right? I just said, oh, yeah, sure. Sounds interesting.
Right.
Well, if you've ever been to a Tony Robbins seminar, for God's sakes, Tone took the stage at 2:00 in the afternoon, the day of the event. And the next thing I know, it's after midnight.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So he takes you out into that big parking lot. And, I'm with 3,000 people, got a big, beautiful fire burning over here in the corner. And, when he takes you out there, he goes, oh, by the way, take off your shoes. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not doing this. Right. But what am I going to do about this shoe thing here, right? Because if I don't take off my shoes, other people are going to see me with my shoes, and they're going to think I'm, wussing out, and that, and we can't have that, right? So I'll just take my shoes off and fake it. Fake it till you make it, as they say, right? So, and then of course, when you got you going out there, what's he got you doing? Chanting. Everybody's going, yes. Yes. You're walking out there, and then you get out there, there's African drums to add to the ambiance, right? Big giant fire, moonlit night, summer, beautiful. Dun, 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 dun. And and I'm like, so what's my strategy? Well, my strategy, I'm going to hide out in the back, which is not a good strategy, because Tony's people know where all the cowards are.
In the back.
And they're really well trained. And sure enough, this guy out of nowhere, could have been you, John, for all I know. This guy comes up to me and he locks eyes with me. And I guess that must be the deal. Once you lock eyes with the person, don't take your eyes off them, right? And this guy comes up and he gets probably, I don't know, maybe 20 feet from me. And he kind of stops and looks at me. He goes, are you okay? And I'm like, and you're not okay. What are you going to say? I'm fine, right? Which is total BS.
Right.
And then he asked me, as soon as I said, I'm fine, he goes, well, are you going to walk tonight? And I said, absolutely not. And he's like, kind of taken back, right?
That's what as they say, that was pretty congruent of you.
Yeah, right. Very, right. Nope, I ain't doing that shit. Not tonight, pal. And he said, he goes, hey, well, that's no problem. He said, we don't want you to do anything you don't want to do. And I went, oh, okay, I like this guy. He's my ticket the hell out of here. And all of a sudden, he asked me a question. Stranger. Don't know who it is to this day. I don't know who this guy was. I never found out.
Right.
But he asked me, he said, well, wouldn't you at least like to watch? And I said, well, yeah, sure, I would. I'd love to watch these idiots burn their feet. Well, I'm standing at the back. I have 3,000 people in front of me. I can't see anything. I can see the fire over here, this big bonfire they got building, right?
Right.
And so what they do is they build that fire, then they take wheelbarrows and they would go and they'd fill those wheelbarrows up with coals. And then they bring in a wheelbarrow and they set up 2 lanes, about 3 feet wide, about 15 to 16 feet long. They put that wheelbarrow in the middle, and then they just take a shovel and they'd shovel those coals onto those lanes of sod, of grass. But I can't see any of that. I don't know that because I got a sea of people in front of me. Well, so he says, well, if you want to see anything, you can't see anything from back here. You're going to have to get in line. Right. Which was true. He was congruent with what he said because I couldn't see anything. Because I'm 100 yards away from the actual action. And so I get in line. I'm just kind of walking along. And all of a sudden I look and I go, and I can see at an angle. I can't see in front of me, but I can see at an angle through the people. And they were doing it, John. They're firewalking. And so my brain's going, what's going on? You have no references for this. How do you make heads or tail? What's going on? What the hell is happening? And, I'm just kind of looking and I'm in this trance. And the next thing I know, this guy comes up and he whispers in my ear. And he said, he knows when you're ready. When he says go, you go. And I thought, dude, you didn't get the memo. you know where you can go. Get away from me. I'm not doing this.
Right.
So next thing I know, I'm in the trance and I'm watching, and I'm kind of and boom, there I am, and I'm at the front of the line, and I'm staring at this lane of grass, and the coals are laid out there. They're glowing bright red. The wheelbarrow's there. You could feel the heat coming off, and I am staring into the abyss, and my heart is pounded. I am scared shitless. I'm out of my mind.
Right.
And there's a trainer standing there. And all of a sudden he kind of screams at me, right? He goes, "Eyes up!" And I'm like, "Oh crap." And I bring my eyes up, and now I'm looking up. And of course, I'm a slow learner because I was in a room with Tony for 10 hours, and he tells you when you get out there, keep your eyes up.
Sure. Sure.
Right? And then all of a sudden he said, "Squeeze your fist and say yes." And I went, "Yes." And he went, "Stronger." And I went, "Yes." And then he got in my face and screamed at me and kind of ticked me off. And he said, "Stronger." And so I threw my arms in the air and I went, "Yes." And he goes, "Go, go, go." I took off.
Next thing you know.
Right? And no plans to do this. No, not doing it. No, no. Boom. Next thing I know, I'm on the back end of the fire lane in the celebration end. And Tony's got two guys that are standing down there, and they stop you. And they said, "Stop, wipe your feet and celebrate." And so I'm wiping my feet, and I'm kind of celebrating, and a girl grabs me and gets me out of the way. And she's like going, "You did it, you did it, you did it," moving me out of the way. And all of a sudden I'm going, "I did it, I did it." Whoa, 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 wait a minute. And I looked back, and the coals are bright red, and all of a sudden it dawns on me, I can feel I burnt my feet really bad.
Right.
I lift up my foot, and I look at my foot, I go, "It's not burnt. It's dirty. It's dirty, but it's not burnt." "Oh, it's my other foot." It's dirty, but it's not burnt. I've got no burns. I just walked on coals that were 1,000 degrees, and I didn't burn myself. And so the question I asked myself was, how the hell did you do that? I don't know how I did it, right? You do something, sometimes you know how you did it. Like if you hit a home run, you practiced, right? Well, this, I didn't have any references, nothing. And so I literally started asking people, "Did you burn your feet? Did you burn your feet?" No, 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 no. Well, the exhilaration I felt that night was unsurpassed. I mean, it was just incredible how incredible I felt, like I had climbed Mount Everest or something, right? But here's where it got interesting for me, John. The next day I came in, and I'm with 3,000 other people. I'd never seen the human connection like I saw that morning of all these people. I played sports, and so I was familiar with the camaraderie of that, but that was nothing like this. People were laughing, and they were hugging, and they were crying, and they were telling each other stories, and they were, again, the humanistic side of bringing people together was unlike anything I'd ever seen or witnessed.
Right.
And I'm like, was that because of the firewalk last night? Is that what's doing this? And it was. It was simply that. So the bottom line is I got so intrigued with the firewalk portion that I found out that Tony uses a lot of volunteers. And again, this was in 1995. And I was given some information how I could get involved if I wanted to. I could fill out some paperwork, and they would bring me in as a volunteer. And I did that. And then very early on, I had a security background, military background, and they brought me in to help with some security. And almost simultaneously, they put me on the fire team, which is started learning the logistics and how to set it up and what was going on behind the scenes, right? So it's like you know, here you are, a movie producer, you know what goes on behind the scenes, right? Where most people have no clue about any of that. They just go in the movie theater and watch the movie, and they have no idea all the work and just what it takes, to put on a good movie and produce a good movie. So there I was in the back of the house now. And the next thing I know, that was in like 96, 97 goes along. They hire me as a subcontractor. And then, and then 2003, Tony pulled me aside, and we were at Date with Destiny in the Bahamas at the Atlantis Hotel. And I got my phone rang in my room, and I got called into the office there that we had. And Tony basically said, "Albie, I'd like you to take over all of my firewalks globally." And I originally resisted it. I was like, "Well, Tony, I can't." And Tony's like, you can't or you won't. And I'm like, I can't. Tony Robbins doesn't like the word no, right? And so I said, well, I can't. And so it had to do with me homeschooling my kids. It had a lot to do with a lot of things. And so he stepped right up and he said, well, what if I pay to have your kids travel with me? Would that make a difference? And I'm like, well, it sure could. So I literally called home and talked to the family. And my son at the time was like 8. And he's like, where's our first event, Dad? And literally our first event was in Sydney, Australia.
Nice.
It was nice. And so Tony, and he treated my kids and my family like gold.
That's
And
fabulous.
so that was in 2003. And in 2005, yeah, we set, Guinness Book wasn't there, but we set a world record. We do know that it was the largest firewalk that had ever been done in London. And there were 12,300 people. And we did that firewalk in just about an hour, if you can believe that.
Wow.
And then,
Well,
yeah, and then I'm driving down
going,
the road. What's that?
going back on, it's crazy, like you're saying, you doing it the first time and how you did it. And for me, it was even crazier, if you can imagine, because the one I went to, my first experience, kind of similar to yours, but he did it on 34th Street on the sidewalk in Manhattan on a Friday night, which was freaking insanity, right? I mean, cabs beeping their horn, drunks falling by. I mean, we're all out in front of this building and we're walking on hot coals on a Friday night in Manhattan. And once again, for me, it was like, this is insanity, man. It's like I never expected to want to do something like that, just like you, or think that I would do it. But when you get to the other side, like you did, I realized that at the time I was working in the post office midnight shift, and I had to go back. And I thought it'd be over by midnight. Of course, it wasn't over by midnight. It was over by 3 in the morning or something. So I'm late for work. I'm got it. But anyway, we finished the fire. I get back to the post office, and I've been there working for 5 years as a mail handler in the midnight shift. I walk in, and it's almost like there was a different glow in the air, and my brain just went, you're out of here. You're over this. Your life needs to go in a new direction. And that's when I made a decision to quit the post office and go for my dreams. And that night, like you, it changed my life in a different path, but it changed my life forever. And it was one of those most amazing things. But, it's like you're saying, you overcame the fear. And that's what we're always talking about is what does that mean when you do it? Because too many people are not willing to go through the fear to get to the other side. And the metaphor for firewalk is you go through the fear to get to the other side. And you might get burned, you might not get burned, but you're not going to get to the other side unless you have the courage to go through the fear and get to the other side. And that's what you did.
Yeah, spot on. Perfectly said. And again, the other side, again, was that next day and watching the human connection with people. And so I knew that I'd gone through a very, very powerful experience. And then I just proved myself, once I got involved with Robbins and took over the firewalks and it was just like one thing after another. I started meeting a lot of celebrities and, I got involved with that. I got to meet some really, really cool and awesome people there. And then 2014, I'm driving down the road, boom, my phone rings and it's Google. And, I was like, what, who, who does that happen to? I mean, you just don't drive down the road and Google call you. And of course, right. So they just wanted to know if I was the Dave Albin that had done the firewalks for Robbins. And they wanted to talk to me about possibly hiring me. And they wanted to know if I was under any contractual obligation or non-compete. And I'm like, no, homeboy's a free agent. So what's up? What do you guys want to do? And the next thing I know, I'm in Mountain View with Google. In fact, when I was there, I had 2 of the executives that we were doing the gig for. There was 148 of them. They pulled me aside, a man and a woman. And they said, you don't know what you've got, do you? I mean, literally. And I'm like, no, but I think I'm about to find out. And they basically said, the marketplace for this is huge. It's off the chain. And I'm like, well, how do you guys know? What do you Google or something? I mean, it was like, so that was phenomenal. And that's when, and then I went back to Tony and said, Tony, I love you, but it's time for me to go. And that was, I was coming up on 20 years. And then the next thing I know, right, I'm at NASA with you. Next, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw up some pictures. If so this is one. This was us down in NASA having a blast down there. This
Oh
is
my gosh, I want that picture. I don't have it. And there's
I'll
Joe.
send that to you, man. That we had NASA was just amazing. It was such a great experience. And then I think did you take us on the glass walk down in NASA? Because this is a picture of you walking me across. Yeah, it was NASA.
Yeah.
And that's a picture of you walking me across the glass. That was the first time I actually glass walked with you. And so that was a very unique experience compared to fire walking.
And you know what's interesting in that picture, the one before, is there's the guy in the smile in the back. That's Joe Koronowski, and Joe was NASA's. He was the space center engineer. So his job every day was to go to NASA and sit there with all those computer screens and take care of the space center, which is really interesting. And then if you go to the next slide that you showed after this one, that's him down there in the corner because I recruited him to help me.
Right.
He's the guy that wipes off your feet before you step off the glass. Wow. That's so cool.
And then here is us, of course, up in Notre Dame.
Oh my gosh. And then Jim Connolly.
Another amazing, powerful individual.
Well, I mean, Jim Connolly is the guy that if you watch the movie Pretty Woman, right? And the hotel scene of the hotel manager, right? That was Jimmy. That was Jimmy's job,
right?
Which is really interesting because he's the one like you. He left the projects and went after his dream. He was in Philadelphia. He couldn't read, he couldn't write, couldn't do anything. Goes out to Hollywood. Next thing you know, he's knocking on the door of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel wanting to get a job, and he ends up getting a job, right? And then
running the hotel and working with Frank Sinatra and living this amazing, powerful life, right?
Right. Yeah. He told a story about Sinatra. His first day on the job, Sinatra walks in and says, "Hey, who's the new kid?" And they said, "Well, that's Jimmy." He says, "Well, how come he won't smile?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know." Next thing you know, Sinatra goes over to him and said, "Hi," goes to shake his hand and says, "My name's Frank Sinatra." And Jimmy's like, "Yeah, I know who you are." Remember, I think he said, "Hey, and I want you to smile." And he goes, "Sir, I'd rather not." He goes, "Show me your smile." Well, right. Jimmy's teeth were all screwed up. And that's where Frank Sinatra gave him his business card to go to his dentist, and Sinatra paid to have his teeth fixed.
That's right. I remember sharing that story. Powerful story.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take you back a little bit because, at Notre Dame, when you gave your speech, I remember it was very powerful because, you took us through, and I think it really moved people. You took us through the darkness that you were in. And I don't know if you want to share that with the audience, but before you turned your life around with AA and before you did that, you went through a real dark period with, drugs and alcohol and, coming close to suicide. And you shared that. And that when you shared the transformation you made, I think it really touched everybody so much because it was such a powerful story of your life and how you changed. So I don't know if you want to
I'm very good with that. After I shared that story there, Jim Connolly ran up. If you remember, he ran up on stage and hugged me because his father was a really, really bad alcoholic. And he just was so, it was just inspiring to him to see somebody that actually had found their way out. So, what happened was that I was adopted when I was 5. And there was a lot of alcoholism in my family. And I'll never forget, it was in 1963. I was sitting in class one day, and the next thing I know, the principal walks into the door of my classroom, walks up to my teacher, and he bends down and he whispers something, and she screamed. She bellowed. It was just unbelievable. It was just a gut-wrenching scream. And now he's trying to calm her down. Well, the next thing we know, he turns to the class and he said, "Boys and girls, I've got some really bad news. John F. Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy, was just killed and assassinated in Dallas, Texas, and we're calling your parents. Everybody's going to go home, and we don't know when you'll come back." And so that started that. Well, we went home, and like everyone else, we started watching it. Well, my dad he had worked in the Pentagon. He was an officer in the military, as you said in your opening. And so he was a ballistics expert. So when they started saying that Kennedy was shot from behind by one gunman, my dad said, no, because we were watching the motorcade go by, and there's this one scene, and all of a sudden Kennedy's head goes back like this, right? And so my dad goes, no, he was shot from the front. I know for a fact, right? So I was exposed to my first conspiracy theory. Well, that was in November of '63. Well, in the summer of '64, it's the first day of summer, and I'm in the TV room. It's summer, man. It's Southern California. You're a kid. You're going into the fourth grade, man. You know what that's like, right? Well, my mom comes in, and I'm in the TV room watching TV, eating cereal, and she says, David, come in the kitchen. Your father and I need to speak with you. She brings me in, sets me down, puts her hand on my hand, and with tears in her eyes, she turns to me and she says, David, we need to tell you something. And that is, we're not your parents.
Wow.
Well, that took me back, right?
Wow.
And then and he goes, and as a matter of fact, your Aunt Dean? Yeah, well, that's your biological mother. And I remember thinking, I don't even like her. It was like, because she was always touching me.
Right.
I wonder why.
Huh.
So, and at this point too, I want to say Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. I had two moms. I had my mom, my biological mother, and I had the mother that raised me and did the best she could. And thank God for both of them. And I'm very grateful to all the mothers out there, because try to come into this world without them.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right.
Well, I was raised by my mother was widowed when my dad died at 4, so she raised me and my brother. So yeah, absolutely.
You can't even imagine.
Yeah.
So that was the summer of '64. Well, later that year, we had to go into Hollywood to my grandmother's house, and Mom says, "Come on, get ready. We're going into Hollywood for the weekend to your grandmother's house." And the next thing I know, my cousin comes up to us. You have to go with us tonight. And she's like pissed off at me, right? And she's like 7 years older than I am. And the next thing I know, we're on a bus and we're going into Hollywood, and we're walking into the Hollywood Bowl, and to watch the Beatles.
Oh, wow.
Right? So, and which was really interesting in and of itself, because I saw them, but I couldn't hear them. Because every time they would start a song, the girls would scream so loud, right? You couldn't even hear them. And shortly after they told me that I was adopted, my dad started drinking again. He had swore off liquor for 5 years when he had, told me that I was, adopted. And, again, a long story short, it was shortly after that at a young age that I tried alcohol for the first time. So I was probably 10 or 11 years old. And you know what? When I tried that alcohol for the first time, it was like rocket fuel. I mean, I'm a little kid, and I remember drinking it. It tasted horrible, but it felt unbelievable. And I was doomed. I from the very start, man. I mean, I was already thinking about drinking more at a very young age. And of course, the alcohol led to drugs and hard drugs and heroin and cocaine and barbiturates and speed and all of that. And then on June 8th, man, of 1988, I woke up that morning having done intravenous drugs and name it. And it was it. It was going to stop that day.
Why?
Because I was in so much physical and emotional pain. You get to a point, you keep pushing that envelope with drugs and alcohol, and here's what it does. It says, you're done. It's because it's so painful.
Right.
Alcohol, the physical pain was so intense.
Mm.
And so all I knew was that morning it was going to stop, John. That was it. We're done. I'm out. And I took a pistol, put it in my mouth, did it twice. And in fact, I talked to some psychologists and some psychiatrists about that moment. And they said, typically, once you get to that point, you got so much physical pain, you don't not pull that trigger. Because I wasn't afraid to die. Right. What I was afraid to do was to keep living. That was terrifying to keep living that way. And the next thing I know, I didn't even know anything about them. And the next thing I know, I made a phone call to Alcoholics Anonymous. They sent a man to come pick me up, and they took me. I went to 3 meetings that day. I went to a noon, a 4:30, a 6:30, and an 8:30. Excuse me. I went to 4 meetings that day. And I don't know, man, it stuck. I was at an all men's group, and those guys grabbed me and they held on to me. And one of them called me the next morning and said, "Hey, I'm going to come pick you up. I'm going to take you to another meeting today." And so that's the kind of love and support that I got. And then I wasn't very long into the program, a couple of weeks, where one of the old timers, well, he had 6 years. He basically said, "Hey, what are you doing right now?" I go, "Nothing." He goes, "Come with me." And the next thing I know, I'm at somebody's house, and we're doing a 12-step call who had called in and wanted help. So just like when I called in, they sent somebody. I went with this guy, and we went over there, and I remember sitting at his kitchen table. He had a pistol sitting on the table. Well, man, I could relate to that. I really had a pretty good inkling how that guy felt. And I remember we got him to a meeting and he didn't kill himself. And I remember thinking, man, what an experience. What a sense of responsibility, because it's not, it's interesting because as AA set up, psychology, psychiatry, doctors, all these people, clergy, you think of all these people that are more qualified to help another alcoholic. Another alcoholic helps another alcoholic because we've been there. We know what it feels like. And it's just phenomenal how that works. In fact, the founders of AA, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob, Bill Wilson was a stockbroker, and Bill Wilson was a proctologist.
Wow.
Right? We jokingly say he was used to dealing with assholes. Right? So, they got together. And in fact, when the nurse called Bill Wilson to come be with Dr. Bob, when Wilson walked in and introduced himself, Dr. Bob was pissed off. He's like, "You're a stockbroker? What are you doing here? You're not in the medical field. You're not a psychologist. You're not a psychiatrist. Who the hell? How dare you come in here and think you can help me?"
Huh.
And Bill Wilson said, "Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm not here for you. I'm here for me. So good luck." And he went to walk out. And Dr. Bob said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 wait, hold on. Maybe I've rushed it. Maybe you should come back tomorrow." And so that's how AA got started. And so that hit me right between the eyes. And so I just fell in love with helping other alcoholics achieve sobriety. Because, for that, John, I'm responsible. My whole life was given back to me.
Right.
In fact, something happened here a couple of weeks ago. My son lives in Boone. I'm in the western part of the state, which is in Ashe County, and about 20 minutes away, my son and his girlfriend live. He's going to App State, and there's a bar over there that has really good wings. And Davey was telling me he's going. He goes, "Come with us, Pop." So I go over there to this bar, and I go in and I order the same thing. I order half cranberry, half soda with a lime, and it's really good. And so we ordered some food. And then, as Davey was ordering, he turns to the bartender and says, "Oh, I know. What do you want? Vodka in what I ordered?" And Davey speaks up. He goes, "Oh no, my dad's a quitter." Right? and so she's kind of like, "Ooh, what's that mean?" Right? And so he goes to tell the story. He says, "Yeah, my dad wasn't a quitter. I wouldn't be here. He's sober, and he's been sober for 33 years, and he's telling the story." Well, the bar's listening to it. And there's a guy sitting right next to my son who's listening to this conversation. Well, the next thing I know, we get our food. I'm drinking my drink. And this guy gets up, comes, and I'm sitting, the bar's like L-shaped, and I'm sitting down here at the L shape. And all of a sudden he comes around, he comes behind me, and he comes up and he goes, "You're a king." And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "You're like a king." And I go, I'm sorry, I don't understand. And he goes, "You've been sober for 33 years? And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, he kind of put his head down and he looked back up and he goes, "My dad was a really bad alcoholic." And I said, "So was mine." And I said, "Tell me more." And so he went into his story. He started telling me that his dad, ever since he was young, was a brutal alcoholic. And the son, this young man who's talking to me, was his caregiver, if you will. Every time shit hit the fan, he had to go take care of it. He had to go drag him out of bars. He had to go pick him up on street corners. He had to get him out of jail. He had to go to court. All this cycle on and on and on and on and on. Well, apparently one night, this kid had enough. And they were talking and they got into this horrible argument. And they both started saying stuff that they didn't mean, but they were just angry and frustrated. And this kid said a lot of stuff to his dad, and he left. He slammed the door and he walked out. Well, the next day, his father died. And so now all these unspoken things come into play, and the guilt and all of that, right? And so this kid is just devastated. And I said, if your father had found AA like I did, his life would have been completely different. And here's what I believe. I believe that if you took the alcohol out of his life, he would have been a completely different human being. He would have treated you considerably different. And here's what I believe. And that is, had he got sober like I did, I think there's a couple things that he would probably want to say to you. And the kid's just like looking at me, right? And I go, there would be a couple things. One, I'm sorry, and I hope you can forgive me. And this kid teared up. He gave me a big hug, and he left the bar.
Wow. Oops, I just lost your volume. You win.
There we go.
Yeah, so he gave you a hug and he left the bar, and then you went.
He left the bar. And it was and a couple of my son's friends were sitting at the bar. They had showed up to come hang with us, and they were just sitting there in awe. And so you just don't know. You don't know where you're going to be, what's happening, who you're going to. And that's why when I get on stage and I talk and I share that, is because I don't know who's sitting out there. I don't know who's going to benefit from that story. Maybe there's somebody that's got a problem with alcohol, right?
Sure.
Maybe it's the son or the daughter or the spouse or whatever. And so that's why I go out there and I tell people, look, I'm not proud of this, but I am here to support you. Might you want to talk? And typically, without fail, somebody always comes up to me and wants to talk. So, AA's taught me many, many great lessons. And one of them, John, is real simple. That when anyone, anywhere reaches out for help, we want the hand of AA to always be there. And for that, I'm responsible. So that is really, my commitment to all that.
And then you do, obviously that is your commitment. And then all the other stuff you've done both with Tony and with yourself, transforming people through fire walks and glass walks. Once again, besides you sharing that powerful story, like I said, I was honored to hear that story when you gave it at Notre Dame, and when Jim came up and hugged you. I mean, he hugged you for all of us, at that moment. I think we all felt the same way. It was so powerful. But you've been involved in seeing people transform. Besides you transforming, what are some maybe stories or people you've seen that kind of just touch you the most, that you saw that transformation, whether it was through your story or through the fire walk or glass walk or whatever?
Well, one of the guys was in AA. This kid came in and he was resisting. He had gone through the revolving door several times, and then one day he came in and I was leading the meeting, and he wanted to interrupt the meeting, and I won't let him. It's like, no, take the cotton out of your ears and stick it in your mouth and calm down, dude. That's not how the format works. Well, he got really ticked off because he said, I'm an alcoholic. He was crying and caring. I go, well, you just hit the lottery, pal. So, relax. And so he came up and wanted to scream at me and yell at me, and he was pretty pissed off at me. Well, he ended up asking me to be a sponsor, and which was a really interesting thing, because shortly thereafter, he went into liver failure. Well, he went to Georgia, and this is in Northern Virginia, by the way. We were, our group was right outside of Washington, D.C. So it was an all men's group. It was a private group, closed meeting. And so we got a lot of people from Washington. We
Right.
got, let's say, we got some Redskins, we got some FBI agents, Secret Service, you name it. Some of them showed up at this meeting. And so Mark was an extraordinary young man. Well, now he needs a liver transplant. Well, he goes on the list at Washington Hospital, and he gets on the list. And the next thing you know, he got his transplant. In fact, he was on the same list as Walter Payton,
Wow.
and he got a liver, and Walter Payton didn't.
Mm.
And of course, Walter went on to pass of liver disease. Now, Walter didn't drink, but he still had liver disease, whatever happened with that. So Mark was eternally grateful. I was literally, and when he was talking with his doctor, with his transplant team, this was back before they had done these transplants. Mark was one of the very first humans on Earth to get a liver transplant. And I remember him asking Dr. Rusky, who was out of Washington Hospital, how much time do I have, Doc? And he said, well, I think I could probably get you 18 months or so. And he goes, that's not good enough. He goes, I need 2 years because I want to see both of my sons graduate from high school. And sure enough, Mark lived about 2 years and saw both of his sons to graduate. I
Wow.
was literally at a Robbins event in New York, and I went in a week early to hang out with the family, and I got the call that Mark had passed. And I flew home and I delivered the eulogy at his funeral. So that was one of the most, memorable guys. I mean, they're all important, they're all great, but there was something about Mark that was really special. And, I went through that whole process of him getting the liver and all that. As far as the firewalks and stuff, I think probably one of the most memorable is we were in Tampa, Florida, and I don't know what's going on. We're just, the firewalks start, everything's going. We're out there. I'm standing at the wheelbarrow. I got my shovel. Tony's running his lane. Joseph McClendon, his lead trainer's at the other lane coming the other way. And all of a sudden, Tony kind of stops and he looks at me and he gives me this really bizarre look like, I think we're going to see some serious shit here in a minute. And the next thing I know, I didn't see it because it's kind of dark out there. Next thing you know, there's this young man in a wheelchair. And come to find out, this young man was a collegiate athlete down in Tampa. And he was hit by a drunk driver. And he lost both legs. And so apparently he was contemplating suicide. Well, one of his buddies pulled him aside one night and said, look, we can't stop you if you're going to commit suicide. But Tony Robbins is coming to town. And I know you studied Tony. Why don't you go see his event before you make this final decision to kill yourself? And so he did. Well, this kid was a collegiate athlete, man. He had a lot of upper body. He was a wrestler, played football, baseball. He was just, he had upper body strength. And the next thing I know, this kid moves his wheelchair, right? And the next thing I know, Tony went down and the kid goes, go, get away, Tony. And the next thing you know, this kid went into a handstand. He leaped forward out of that wheelchair, went into a handstand and walked across the fire on his hands. That was a really, really definitive moment. Tony and I teared up. We were both completely blown away. And though that was such a memorable moment for me, but you know what? It is for everybody. It was extraordinary because this kid was able to do it on his hands. But, I've seen people that were 100 years old. My kids walked, my daughter who's in the other room right now, she was 6 years old when she firewalked the first time. My son was 9 years old. We were in New York, we were in New Jersey, and we waited. Tony knew my kids were going to walk, and at the very end, the kids came up and Tony grabbed my daughter's hand. I had one hand, he had the other hand, and we walked her across the fire. My son stepped up and Tony looked down at him and he goes, I love you and I love your daddy. Now go. And my son took off.
Well, here's a fun story you'll love because, like yourself, I don't know how many times you've done it, probably way, way, way more than me. But, I had done it, I don't know, 8 times, at different events and done it. And then the one time, I think it was in Washington, D.C., I was on Tony's line, the only time I was on his line, right? So he's in front, and you know how intense he is, right? And he's like, he looks at me, and he doesn't even give me a second. He's like, "You're ready, go." And so I'm like, okay, I start walking. And every step of the way, I burned. Every step of the way, right? And I get to the end and I get off, and, we celebrate and everything. But it was kind of funny because up until that point, I didn't believe it was real. It was like, I don't
Yeah,
get
right.
burned. It ain't real, can't be real. But at that point, I said, okay, this is real. But the metaphor that I took away, and of course, that he shared with us, but was that, and sometimes in life you get burned, but that shouldn't stop you from going forward. That just means you still got to go forward. It's not like life's gonna you go through and it's always gonna be easy. It's challenging. It's hard. Sometimes you get burnt, and that's okay too, as long as you keep moving forward. So I went on to do it multiple times after that, and it wasn't like it was. In a way, I was kind of glad I got burned because it just told me, okay, this is real, and when I do it, I had a different appreciation for it. So it's a pretty interesting experience for those who've never experienced it, but I think it has changed a lot of people's lives for sure.
Oh, no question about it. No question. I remember hearing the story about this young man that was thought he could be a screenwriter, and his family went, "You're never going to become a screenwriter. It's not going to happen. You're not going to pierce Hollywood. It just ain't going to happen. Stop living in this dream world." Well, he goes to a Tony Robbins seminar, and boom, guess what? He does his firewalk. He goes to the event. He goes home, and guess what? He wrote "Sleepless in Seattle."
Oh, that's right. I forgot all about that. That's
Right,
right.
right. So you never know. You just don't know what's going to happen. And
Absolutely.
so from my perspective now, I get to continue to do this. My kids have been a huge help to me. My daughter for a long time traveled with me. We brought my grandson. She took a lot of pictures and videos and things, was able to help me. And now she's got a wonderful life with a wonderful young man, and my grandson's going to be 5 in about a week. And
Congrats.
she's got a really great job. She's a vet tech, and she does, she takes care of animals, which has been her dream. It's her passion. She loves animals. My son goes to App State. He's going to graduate this next semester with his bachelor's degree in computer science and engineering, and he's met the girl of his dreams. So the kids are, and so dad's an empty nester now, and he's found the people out there to help and step in, and it's just
That's
I pinch myself, John. It's like, what?
no. Well, the other thing, we've kind of gone on similar tracks in a way. I'm going to show some pictures of you, but both of us have kind of transformed ourselves physically. And obviously, that's a big picture. So I'm going to show a picture to the audience of you right here. That's
Oh,
one of the things.
geez.
Yeah. So, you know,
Ah! Yeah.
exactly. But that's part, besides all the other transformations, a physical transformation is something that you did as well. And like I said, we've kind of gone on similar tracks as part of, I work out now 7 days a week, and I'm like, that's my addiction. I love it. It's the greatest thing in life to do. And matter of fact, after this is over, I'm going to run to the gym in the hotel and go work out. But you can see in your transformation in that picture, you've changed a lot, and once again, you took action, and you took positive action, diet, health, and everything, and you changed your life physically as well.
Yeah. In fact, where I had that epiphany, I was at Google. I was on stage.
Really?
Yeah, and I looked down, right, and I can't see my shoes. I'm like, wow, okay, that's got to change. And it was my grandson, because I knew that he was on the way, right? And
Right.
so I'm like, so do you want to spend time with him? I'm asking myself these questions. I'm like, you want to change your life? Ask hard questions. And like, do you want to see him? Do you want to spend time with him? Do you want to go to his wedding? Do you want to see him graduate from high school? Then you better get your shit together, and you better start doing something about your life. And it's interesting, John. I heard somebody say something the other day. I really liked it. They said every human, every man and woman has 2 lives, and the second one starts when we realize we have only one.
Mm.
And so we get caught up in all this idea, that we got to make a living rather than designing our lives. Yeah, and there it is, man. Because what doesn't challenge you doesn't change you. And I'm in a really cool position right now because coming out of COVID, everybody's all separated, right? Mask wearing versus not wearing, vaccine versus not vaccine, political. The liberals against the conservatives, and I love Donald Trump. No, I hate Donald Trump. No, I love Joe Biden. No, I hate Joe. So the division that's going on right now and the disruption is in every company. And if CEOs and entrepreneurs don't fix it, it's going to cost them a fortune. How do you fix it? Put them on the fire. And I'll close down. One of the things that I do at the fire now is that I do what's called the heart connection, and it's through the Ho'oponopono prayer, which is an ancient Hawaiian healing process. And so what I learned is a couple of years ago, I think in 2013, National Geographic went to a fire walk in Portugal, and they got permission to put heart monitors on all the people that were attending and all the walkers. And they found as soon as the fire walk started that everybody's heart calibrated, started beating at the same time. So I've learned how to do that at the fire walk. And so I'm telling CEOs, look, man, give me your people. It's going to be okay. Let me get them back to the humanistic side. We'll break them out of this. Just like when I went to my first fire walk that next day, when I saw everybody connecting, that was the magic, right? That's when I said, man, look at this. This is real, man. Does the fire really do that? And if you study fire walking culturally, it's been around for thousands of years, and it's been used as a rite of passage. The Tahitians, the Hawaiians, the Polynesians, the Native American Indians, the Indo-Europeans, the people of India, all over the world, people have used this powerful experience to keep people united and to keep the brother and sisterhood between them.
That's very cool, man. Anything as we come to the end, anything you want to share with the audience, like you said, that prayer or anything else you want to share? Because you've had a life, like I said, the reason I did this show, Live Courageously, is I think people need to have that message to understand how to deal with life. But also, like you said, the other side of it is that experience of bringing us together after that experience, what we have in common, that's another big, important, powerful thing that, we have. It's hard for people to believe it, but we have a lot more in common than we have differences. And, just reminding them of our humanity, our common humanity, is such a powerful thing. So, you said that, from the next day after the firewalk, but I think people need to hear that and remember that, of course, we're always going to have differences. We all experience the world differently. That's part of life. But that's not what we have in common. And we should focus on the important stuff, which is what we do have in common to make things better for ourselves, our family, and for the world.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna throw it to you as we wrap this up, and thank you, but share us something that you would like to close out, man. And thank you for being part of this.
Well, first of all, John, thank you so much. I love you to death. You're a real brother, and we've shared some really great times together, and we have so much in common. And I'm honored that you brought me to this podcast to share a little bit of information. I'll close with this. The chances of being born are 1 in 400 trillion. If you look at, your mom was over there, your dad was over there, the only two people on earth that could create you. Your mom went through all these cycles, had all these eggs. There's only one. Your dad contributed, the group of swimmers, there's only one. In any group, there's 60 to 100 million. And here you are. And if you go back and you look at your ancestry, if you just go back like 400 years, I think it's like 4,800 people had to come together for you to be here. And typically in every family tree, there's one individual in there that takes the family to another level and brings light and everything and to that family. And I challenge you to be that person. You're not here by an accident. And you're doing that, John. You're doing that for you. You're doing it for your family. I'm doing it as well. And it's a very, very, very powerful mindset to take your life and your family and your heritage in a whole new direction. So,
well, definitely, and take a look online. Look at Firewalk Adventures. Check out Dave Albin's pages. anything you can do. He's definitely somebody who has transformed lives and continues to transform lives. And I was, I say, Dave, I've been blessed with so much riches of people in my life, not necessarily financial riches, but the amount of people like yourself that I've connected to in my life just makes me feel so honored and blessed. And you're somebody, when we connected at NASA, and then went on to connect again at Notre Dame. And then, I gotta put up this picture because it's one of my favorite pictures of us in Beverly Hills when we hung out with the
Oh God, I love that.
the two guys with the sunglasses. It's
who the hell took that picture?
we asked the passerby to take it. It was just, we were hanging out, and you were at matter of fact, you were on the Larry King show doing something, and we got together and had lunch, and then just kind of roamed around Beverly Hills, and we took that picture together. But yeah, and that picture, and then we took one with me with the sunglasses, which I love too. So that day was very special, man. And you're a very special person. So I thank you, man, and love you with all my heart. Good stuff, Dave.
Thanks, brother. I love you. All right. Until next time. Let's stop looking for heroes, people, and be one. Take care, John.
Say that one more time.
Let's stop looking for heroes and be one.
Right on.
Right on.
Take care,
right,
brother.
Bro. Love you. Thanks. Love you too.
Well, that's one more show, people, of Live Courageously. And this was the 10th show. And obviously you listen to his life and overcoming drug addiction, alcoholism, getting close to suicide, turning his life around with AA, then turning his life around and becoming, being afraid of doing the fire walk, and then becoming the person who ran the firewalk for Tony Robbins, and now continues to do it with his own company, Firewalker Ventures. So Dave Albin is somebody that I think should inspire you. And no matter what you're facing, these are the people we need to listen to, people that inspire us to be better than we are, inspire us to overcome fear, to be courageous, to live courageous, and to also contribute to everyone to make our community, our friends, our family, and our world a better place. So thank you for being here with Live Courageously. You can check out the show, like I said, on YouTube. And until then, have a great Mother's Day and spend time with your family. And until I see you next time, God bless.